Okay, guys. Hey, I'm excited to be with you. Hopefully, you had some good stuff written down there and that you got into that good space of gratitude. And Julie told me great message already. So I guess thanks for being here, guys. We're done. If I, I'm kidding. So hey, before we get going today, it wouldn't be me doing Morning Ascent if I didn't teach you something about baseball. I don't think so. And I know there's some of you on here that think that it's a very boring game, and that's okay. I understand why you think that. But here's what I wanted to tell you. So last night in the Trevor here that's in the room with me said it's okay. It's a thinking man's game, and so anyway, hey, so last night I got an alert, and I think I've shared with you guys that I just love baseball. Like I get asked a lot of times, "Who's your favorite team?" And honestly, I don't know that I have a favorite team. I just love baseball. And so at night, a lot of times I just go and find what's the game that's on that looks like it's the best game. Well, last night I got an alert on my phone, and honestly, I don't even know where this alert came from, but I got this alert, and it said that Carlos Rodon, who is a pitcher for the Chicago White Sox, had a perfect game going. Now, let me explain what that means to you guys in case you don't understand what a perfect game is. In baseball, to achieve a perfect game as a pitcher, you have to not allow one single person to even touch first base. So in order to get a perfect game would mean you would go 9 innings without allowing anyone to touch a base. So let me say that a little bit different way. Essentially, the fewest number of batters you could ever face in a game would be 27, because you get 9 innings, 3 outs per inning. So in order to get a perfect game, what that would mean is you would not face more than 27 batters in the game. Well, Carlos Rodon had that going on. So as he started the 9th inning, he was 3 outs away from being able to achieve the perfect game, which let me tell you, and I don't know the number. I should have probably looked it up, but the number of times that a perfect game has happened, I want to say it's like 23 or something in the whole history of baseball. It is very, very low, the number. So ultimately, like any time that I get that type of a notification. So here's what happened last night is I get this notification that says Carlos Rodon has a perfect game going into the 9th inning. So I tell my wife, which my wife actually is a baseball fan, believe it or not, as well. And I say to my wife, hey, Carlos Rodon's got a perfect game going on. And she's like, don't turn it on. Don't turn it on. It's going to jinx him, which that is one of the other things that just kind of so you guys know, if you're the pitcher and you have a perfect game going on, which meaning in the first few innings, it's not unusual to have a perfect game going. But once you start to get into the 5th, the 6th inning, and the pitcher has a perfect game going on, what tends to happen is after he's done pitching and he goes into the dugout while his team is up to bat, nobody talks to him. Like everybody stays away, because it is kind of this belief of you don't talk about it. It is an unwritten rule of you do not talk about with the pitcher that he's got a perfect game. You don't even mention it at all. Well, so yeah, Chad just said 23 times. So I was right when I said 23. That there's only 23 times this has ever happened. And think about the hundreds of games that go on. Well, so this guy has that going on. Well, to start the 9th inning, what ends up happening is the first guy he hits the ball. He didn't get a hit, but he hits the ball, goes down, and he's sprinting to first base as the first baseman fielded the ball. And now the first baseman is running over, and the first baseman actually slides into the base and just beats the guy by a fraction of a second. In fact, they challenged it and went to video to review, and he barely beats him. So now he's only 2 outs away from getting the perfect game. Next guy comes up to bat, and as he's pitching to him, he gets 2 strikes on him, and the guy fouls off a few balls. Well, all of a sudden, the pitcher then throws a slider, which if most of you probably don't know what that means, but basically a pitch that's going to dive down and in on the batter. It dives down and in, and it hits the guy in the foot, which if you get hit, you get your base. And so the guy got to first base, ruined his perfect game. In the ninth inning with only 2 outs to go, he ruined his perfect game. Well, now here's the good news. They still had not given up a hit. So the next rare thing in baseball is to pitch a no-hitter. And so he then faced the next couple of guys and was able to get out without giving up a hit. Almost did on the last out as well. Well, here's the thing. So what does that have to do with us, and what does it have to do in terms of what we are doing? So let's see, Rebecca just threw in there, out of 201,800 games. So there you go. I had no idea there'd been that many. There's been 201,800 games, and only 23 times have pitchers been able to get a perfect game. Now, since 2001, there have been 13 times, though, that a pitcher has taken the perfect game into the ninth inning. So stop and think about that for a minute. There have been 13 different times just since 2001. So in the last 20 years, you've had about half as many times that people have had the opportunity to get a perfect game going into that ninth inning. And 13 times in the last 20 years, the pitcher has ended up giving up a hit, or actually surprisingly hit the batter a number of times. Well, so stop and think about that. Here's my point with it is, if you think about it, for a pitcher to do that in the first or the second inning, to get 1, 2, 3 innings, maybe even 4 into a game with a perfect game going on, really is no big deal. Like I said, people still talk to him, they treat everything like normal, but think about as you get into it, and if you're that pitcher, and to be able to go down in history of one, he would have been the 24th person to get a perfect game. The pressure starts to mount on you. And as you go out onto the mound, you're going to start to feel a little bit of pressure. You're going to start to overdo things just a little bit. And here's the thing. I think if what would happen is these pitchers would decide that, hey, I'm going to approach this as if it's the first inning. See, if they went out in the ninth inning and approached it as if it was the first inning, they probably would be totally fine. But we tend to put this pressure on ourselves to perform and to achieve, when what we need to do is just take a breath, relax, and do it as if it's just something we have done every single day for our whole entire life, which for these pitchers have been doing it for since they were little kids as well. So anyway, just some thoughts on that. For me, anytime I get that notification, my wife, and like I said, as you would imagine, in the last 20 years, 13 different times probably that I've gotten the notification that there's a perfect game going on, I will say to my wife, perfect game going into the ninth inning. And every time she tells me, don't turn it on, you're going to jinx it. And even after last night, after he hit the batter, my wife said, you jinxed it. Oh yeah, I turned it on. Oh, I watched the game. Yeah, it's my fault. No, but here's what I said to my wife. Is it truly my fault that happened? No, absolutely not. It is at the end of the day, I'd say it's the pitcher's fault for he got into his own head is really what ended up happening, because he was 2 outs away from performing. We try to be a little too fine in what we're doing. So, all right. So that was not my intention of the message. That probably took way longer than I intended for it to do. But just I think it's a good thing for us to think about is don't put so much pressure on yourself, meaning just perform. If you have practiced and done it, then you are ready, and trust it in the moment. See, trust your routine that you have gone through. Stick to the routine is what we need to do. All right, here's what I wanted to share with you guys though today. So driving in today, when I turned the car on, it was on a radio station, and the DJ that was on the radio station made this comment. So typically when I jump in the car in the mornings, I will almost always, it's pretty rare that I will listen to something that's not some type of a motivational or a positive message as I drive in the mornings. But this morning when I turned the car on, I could hear this DJ talking, and he said, we are going to make a phone call. So him and his co-DJ, I don't know if that's what you call him, but him and his co-DJ decided they were going to do a prank phone call basically. And what he said was, we are going to make just a random phone call. We're just going to randomly dial a phone number, and we're going to see how long we can keep the person on the phone. Well, as soon as he said that, I was like, all right, I got to listen to this. So as I'm driving, he's calling. and they get somebody that answers the phone. And when she answered the phone, here's what he said is, and I don't remember what his name is, but he said his actual name. And he said, I'm with the United States Census Bureau, not census, senseless Bureau. So he says, I'm with the United States Census Bureau, and I need to ask you a few questions. Is that okay? And she says, okay. And then he started asking some just senseless questions. And like, so for example, the first question he asked her was, when you got to the end of Harry Potter book 1, did you tell your kid that he died just so you wouldn't have to read the rest of the series? And she of course was like, no. And so he asked a few other questions. Well, she did what people do to you. So here's my point in sharing this with you. She did what people do to you. Oh, I need to go. I was just in the middle of something. See, how often do you hear that when you're making your phone calls of, oh, I was just walking into a meeting, or oh, I don't have time for this right now. So she did that. Now recognize that's just a script they're using. And so who's better at their script, you or them? See, if they're able to get you off the phone, they're better at the script. But here's what's interesting is she said to him, hey, I need to go. And he said, okay, one more question, just one more question. I promise it's the last question. And she said, okay, go ahead. Now, here's the point. He then asked a question, and I wish I could remember what it was now, because I'm not remembering what the question was. But whatever it was, it made her laugh. And because she laughed, he then asked her 4 more questions. And finally, the question that he lost her on, that she finally did hang up, was he said, if somebody takes off their shirt and sits down, does it just look weird or something? It was some kind of a weird thing, like, or is it gross or something like that? And that's finally when she just then realized this was a senseless survey, and she hung up on him. But here's the point. What happened on that phone call was by him just saying, let me ask you one more question. And then he caused her to laugh on that question. And like I said, I wish I could remember what it was, because it was a funny question. But she laughed when he asked the question. And as a result of it, then he didn't ask, can I ask you another question? He just asked another question. And she answered. And here's the interesting thing. So there's 3 things that have to happen on each of your phone calls. The first one is you have to connect. See, and ultimately, I guess what I'm saying is this. He didn't have that connection initially. But the moment that he made her laugh on the call, meaning, so for you and I, too many times when they answer the phone, they assume you're a telemarketer, and their objective is to get off the phone. And as soon as you can let them see you're just a normal human being and that you're fine and that you are not there to hurt them, once they see that, you create this connection, they're now going to be willing to talk to you. See, once he made her laugh, she was now willing to talk to him. And as she then talked to him, and she allowed him then to ask 4 more questions before he asked one that she just was like, this is dumb, and hung up. Now, once you have connected, so you create that connection with the person, the next thing we have to do is create value. See, how are you going to separate yourself? Or I love the way that Thomas Friese in the book, The Secrets of Question-Based Selling, the way he says it is you got to make people curious. See, if they're not curious, they don't want to talk to you. So you got to either, you can think of it as create value, or you got to create some curiosity. See, a lot of times what you've got to do in order to set an appointment, they have to be curious, or they have to see the value in talking to you. Now, I love the example that Thomas Friese used in that book, The Secrets of Question-Based Selling. What he does, or what he recommended to a real estate agent that was calling farmers about developing their land, was the guy would call and then leave a message that in the book, Thomas Friese says, you sound like Charlie Brown's teacher. And think about it. When you listen to a message on your phone, now some people probably are on here going, who's Charlie Brown? But what happens is they hear, wah, 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 wah. Like, think about it for you. When you hear somebody, you have a voice message and you can tell it's a salesperson. You only listen for about 3 seconds before you kind of hear wah, 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 delete. So he said to this guy, you got to create some curiosity on the phone. So what he did is he said, let me do the next one. He got a voicemail and he said this. And it makes me wonder, if we did this with for sale by owners, how many would call us back if you get a voicemail. But he said he had printed out a copy of the guy's tax records, this farmer's tax records. And he said, I am holding a copy of your tax records in my hand, and I have some questions for you. Please give me a call back. Guess what? The farmer called back. See, if you create curiosity, so stop and think about it. If you're going to leave messages when you call people, what are you saying that's going to create the curiosity for them to call back? When you get them on the phone, are you creating some value or creating the curiosity that has them say, hey, no, I want to talk to this person to find out more of what they're talking about. Now, if you did that with a for sale by owner and they called you back and said, okay, so like, what's the question you have about my tax records? Really, all you would have to do is just ask them, well, it states here that you have this much square footage. Is that correct? It states here that the basement is finished, or whatever. Just have some question that you could ask them that allows you to then create that connection with them. And then the third thing that needs to happen on every single phone call that we do is that we have to close. You have to ask for an appointment. I'm amazed at how many times I will hear agents or watch agents that they will get onto a phone call and they will create the connection. They'll create value, but then they fail to ask for the appointment. And they'll say things like, all right, well, you know, if you hear of anybody interested, let me know. So there's only 5 ways in the English language that you can ask for an appointment. And if you're saying anything besides these 5, now there are different versions of these 5, but there's only 5 ways to ask for an appointment. And it's what time, which time, how soon, when, and where. That's it. Those are the only 5 ways in the English language. If you are saying, can we get together? You're not asking for an appointment. You're asking if it's possible. If you ask, would you like to get together? You're not asking for an appointment. You're asking them if they would like it. And it doesn't matter if they would like it. What matters is what time, which time, how soon, when, and where. See, if you say to somebody, what works better, afternoons or evenings? That is just another version of which time. So that works because you're saying which time works better, afternoons or evenings. The one that is the worst that people do is, why don't we get together? See, if I were to ask all of you guys, why don't you give me some money? You're going to just tell me the reason you're not going to give me money. You're not going to, you notice that when a panhandler sitting on the side of the road, they don't put on there, why don't you give me some money? Because you're not going to get money. You're going to get the reason you're not going to get money. Well, guess what happens if you do that with a prospect? As soon as you say, why don't we get together? They're going to tell you the reason you're not going to get together. So there's only 5 ways in the English language: what time, which time, how soon, when, and where. All right. Hey, thank you for being with me, you guys. So, hey, what are you going to do differently as a result of it? How can you implement it? How are you going to implement connecting, creating value, and closing so that you can pitch a perfect game today? That's what I want to see, is for you guys to go out and pitch the perfect game. All right. Well, I got a clap. I didn't stand up, but that's okay. All right. So, hey, thanks for being here with me. Let's close it up now with our closing affirmations. Now they're telling me how great I am. Yeah. All right. Let's do our closing affirmations. Thanks for being here, guys. Make